Hey guys, so welcome to today's video. So I've got a very interesting guest, Valerie. So quickly how I found Valerie's channel, I was on Twitter and one of my friends, John Seabolt at Seabolt Speaks, shared a video to do with linguistics and how can you acquire a native like accent as an adult learning a second language. And it was a video by Valerie that I found was really well done and quite interesting. So I watched some of her other videos as well. Found out she's learnt Chinese. Eng- English isn't her native language, sort of. I guess maybe we can talk about that a bit later. So she's learnt a bunch of languages to pretty high levels of success, and I wanted to get her on and just chat about some language stuff. So yeah, and I'll leave links to everything in the description. So do you want to give a brief introduction to yourself or your channel?
Sure. So actually, my name is pronounced Valeria.
Valeria. Okay.
Everyone
Fair.
gets it wrong. It's okay. Yeah, because it's a Russian name. So in Russian, it would be pronounced Valeria.
Uh,
But yeah, so I'm Valeria. I Man, I need
so
to
just
have
carry
like
on.
an elevator speech or something about myself. I feel like you said it all, but
Apart from the name, right? That's the important thing I just
yeah, no,
get
it's
wrong.
okay. I mean, John got it wrong too. Um, Everyone gets it wrong. It's all right. I don't know what else to say though. Awkwardly. Uh,
What sort of stuff do you do on your channel and like to share? I guess because
oh,
it's not
sure.
all languages, right? I think I saw some other videos non-language related as well.
Well, yeah, there was one. um,
Something about friends and online or
yeah,
something.
yeah. So my channel is basically a place where I use it as my creative outlet to talk about and like even research things that I just find interesting that people who I don't know are in my life other than maybe my mom don't really find interesting. So it's a way for me to have kind of put myself into a community where I
Mhm.
can share ideas and have conversations about these kind of things. So
Yeah.
like languages is one of them, learning languages and all like the really cool intricacies of how that happens like in your brain and like in the um, interpersonal communications and just like psychologically all the stuff that's
Mm.
really fascinating to me. So mostly my channel is about languages and linguistics and like psychology and how that kind of all works together. So I guess
Yeah.
it's kind of like about communication and the psychology of communication if you want to put it like one wrapper around it.
It's quite interesting what you said about like as opposed to like keep on speaking to your mom about the same things over and over again or just your friends because I find if you speak to someone in the language learning community you can have like a 2 hour conversation you can go like by like that and you can just talk about
Yeah.
loads of little intricate things but then if you speak to someone who's not really into it they're like oh you've learned Chinese that's pretty cool and then that's like the end of
Yeah.
the conversation.
Yeah.
And
No,
I
it's
feel
so
there's so
true.
many like so many misconceptions as well to do with language learning and like the people that things say like they always ask like oh but like how long does it take you to get fluent and stuff like that and they always ask us if it's like this binary thing and
Hmm.
like loads of stuff like that and it's quite yeah it's always interesting when you get someone on who's actually like got the same interest as you and then you can just kind of discover all the little intricacies as you were talking about. So yeah, I'll leave all
Yeah.
the links to Valeria in the description. And yeah, so how did you get into languages? So you said your mother tongue was originally Russian, and then you moved
Hmm.
to the United States at a young age, right? You said to New York.
Hmm.
So where did it go from there? How did you develop an interest in foreign languages, and what did you learn first?
Sure. So obviously at that point, I was already speaking Russian, and then I was put in an environment where I was just going to naturally end up learning and speaking English.
Hmm.
Um, and then I think there might have been something about me being different from a lot of other people, like other what do I want to call them, like children my age, that I was already different from them in that way, that like, oh, at home I speak Russian, with my mom I speak Russian, I know this other culture and language in my family, like half my family is also somewhere else, like that's not the same as everybody else. So I felt that was something that made me like different and unique, and I really, I think, clung to that. And I felt, I don't know, um, I wanted to really keep that as part of my identity.
Mm.
So when I got the opportunity to also like learn Italian a little bit with my best friend's mom, like on every Thursday after school, and then when I got to do French as a second language in middle school and onward, like I just really loved it for obviously um, that reason, that it like fueled my identity of that kind,
Mm.
but also I also just really enjoyed the process of language learning, because not only does it like, I mean, there's so many reasons, and I'm sure everybody watching this will already know all of these, but it's like it opens the door for you to be able to talk to new people and like understand people on the street saying
Mm.
whatever, or watching movies in a different language without needing dubs or subtitles necessarily, or all these things. So just like the generic reasons, but also,
I mean, there's some pretty good ones. So.
yeah. um, but also, I think the other thing was that it was something that, like, it was obviously something that had a real life implication.
Mm.
This is not the right word, but you know how in school you're learning like math and history and like English, whatever, and you don't really see how that applies to the real world. Like you can't really use that
But
anywhere
then it's like with
necessarily.
some like foreign language, you could learn a new word, go to like the shop down the road and use it with someone around the
Yeah.
corner from you and get like real feedback straight away.
Yeah, it was like one of the only actually
It's a lot more
useful,
tangible.
like
Yeah.
directly useful things that you could learn in school. So I thought that was like, wow, why does no one else care? Because a lot of
Yeah.
my other classmates, they were just like taking a language like whatever. Oh, this is the one that I'm going to put the least effort in. And I was just like trying so hard, always, trying to be the best, you know.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I've got a few questions from that.
mhm.
I mean, first of all, I kind of want to say, I don't know, I thought maths was quite useful, maybe.
Oh, well, yeah, yeah.
But,
But I
like,
mean, like calculus, if you think about
yeah.
that, it's like, do you use that every day?
I mean,
Probably
yes,
not.
but at work. But anyway,
Okay,
not
okay,
to
yeah.
go down that rabbit hole. But I was just curious. So you said because you were growing up was kind of like this almost dual identity as a kid. So I know they can say a lot of the times when you're growing up as like monolingual or just as an American or British person, you kind of get caught in this ignorance and kind of get so easy to just not like notice the kind of outside world, so to speak, and not to notice all these different viewpoints that you can look at the same thing. So I'm
Mhm.
curious if when you were younger, if you had any like noticeably different like ideas or like perspectives of view on like certain topics compared to your like schoolmates, just because you had like you
Mm.
can look at it from like the Russian and English perspective, whereas they'd necessarily only be looking at it from like through the eyes of an American.
Oh, that's hard to come up with on the spot.
Yeah,
But
probably just
I,
not to put any pressure on or anything.
yeah, I can't think right now um, of any specific scenarios of where that happened, but I'm pretty sure it definitely had. Um, so, yeah, as we go in the conversation, that'll be like in the back of my head. I'll try to think of it, but yeah.
It's okay. I mean, we've got a lot of I just drank water and it went down the wrong way. So it's just going great already. Um, we've got lots of stuff to talk about. So you went through and you started. I think you said Italian first, and then French. You were going to you're going to your friend's mum's house to learn Italian.
Yeah.
So your friend was Italian at school, and I guess were they kind of Italian but growing up in the UK in America, so it's very kind of like this dual identity similar to what you were experiencing. Is that what it
It
was
was
like? Or
so it was different because I was already I wasn't rejecting Russian
mm,
culture or language at this point. I was like speaking it with my mom, and that was the language that I wanted to speak at home. It was the language I associated with like home, family, you know.
interesting.
So, but my friend, she was like her heritage was Italian and her mom spoke Italian fluently, but my friend was different in that she had refused to learn it properly, and my she could understand like things that her mom would say, like when she would be like "Basta, Danielle," like blah 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 blah, right? Like stop that, come here, do this, whatever, manja manja, whatever. Obviously, she understood all that, but she would respond in English. She would
Yeah.
never speak back in Italian, and her mom was like, "All right, Valeria, maybe my daughter will be more willing to learn Italian if you also are there." So it's kind of like a play date.
It's
And I
interesting.
was like, "Oh
Like,
yeah,
oh,
sure."
free lessons. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So it was like, "Oh yeah, free lessons, but also more time to hang out with my friend." And like, because we would hang out after, and then I would have dinner at her house, and it would be like,
Oh, nice.
fun. So that's where
What an
the
interesting
Italian
way to
started
get
for
started.
me. Yeah. Hmm.
That's really interesting because having spoke to most of my ABC or BBC friends, American-born Chinese and British-born Chinese, if people don't know what those mean, and like the vast majority I know are just kind of like your Italian friend. They just say it because I think it's very natural to when you're wanting to grow up in an environment, and I don't have this experience. It's just from like listening to what my friends have told me, but they kind of said like when you were younger growing up, you don't want to identify as like a Chinese living in America or a Chinese living in England. You want to just be a normal British person or a normal American person. So they kind
Yeah.
of almost like a lot of ABCs, I think, from what I'm conversation with them, have said they basically like reject their own like culture and just say, no, I'm an American. And then they
Yeah.
kind of get to a later age and they're like, damn, I really should have learned Chinese when I was a kid. And then they kind of really
Hmm.
regret it later.
Hmm.
Um, and then there are a few friends I know that actually can speak pretty well. But I think most of the ones I know, they kind of really regret that they didn't take the opportunity as a kid.
Hmm.
Um, it's quite interesting. And then,
Yeah.
so later down the road, you started French at high school. Was that something you picked? Did you have a choice? Because maybe it was just me. I assumed most Americans in the UK would learn Spanish as their second language.
Yeah. I did have a choice. I could choose between Spanish, French, Italian, and Latin. Um, and my mom really was pushing for me to do Italian because she was like, "They'll be an easy age. You already know how to speak a lot." And I was like, "Mom, do you really think I can't get an A by myself?" So I was like, "I'm gonna do French." Um, I at that point I didn't do Italian just out of spite. I didn't choose Latin because I felt like that
Just
I don't
not
know.
used
I felt
today.
like it was dead. It wasn't usable. I don't know. Also, the students that did take that, typically they weren't interested in like classics or anything. They just thought that would be the easier one. Um, so I was like, I don't want to really be among those people either. And then Spanish, I didn't choose for a really sad reason now that I think about it. Like with my current perspective, I literally just didn't like the way that it sounded back then.
Mm.
So I was like, I'm not drawn to it. So,
I don't know. I think that's a good reason. I don't know. It's hard to explain. That sometimes you just listen to a language and you
mhm,
just think, "Whoa, that sounds so cool," and other times you just think, I don't need to learn
yeah,
that. And like,
yeah.
it's hard to explain why. It's just like a feeling that you get. I remember
Hmm.
when I listened to like Cantonese before, I was like, "That sounds so cool. I need to learn that." And then when I learned Japanese, listen to some like Japanese now, I'm just like, "It sounds so cool to me." I'm just like, "No, no, Luke, you need to focus on Chinese. Stop getting distracted." Yeah, but so
Hmm.
I understand that completely. It's hard to explain like why you get drawn into certain things. And I don't know what it is for me. I always seem to get more drawn in by Asian languages, specifically like Chinese and Japanese. I don't know any Japanese yet,
Yeah, me
but
neither.
it's on the list to learn.
Yeah, me
um,
too.
So then after French, you carried on going through, and then later somehow developed an interest in linguistics and Chinese. How did that go about?
So, for French, I kept doing that all throughout high school, and then a tiny bit in college where I took like a discussion class, a literature discussion class that was taught in French. So that was my French journey. Then in high school, I
Wait,
also,
so at the point of then, they were using
Mhm.
French in the entire class to like debate different topics, or
so like when I went to university, I had a bunch of classes to choose from for like an elective, like an
uh,
extra class, and I chose to do that one, which was in the French department. So it was like an English class in the sense that you read books and discuss them and write essays, but that was all taught in French. So in the class, we were all speaking French, reading French books, and writing essays in French. But yeah.
so that's interesting. See, your French class was in high school, was it? I didn't ask what time it was. Was it in high school
It
or
was middle
before
school
that?
to high school. So it was from sixth grade to 12th grade.
And you found from doing just classes alone, you could go to university and understand books and stuff like that, or you did a lot of stuff on yourself, like own right, like own more work on French in your own time before you could get to that level,
Um,
or was it kind of getting
so
there and then struggling and trying to be thrown in the deep end and seeing if you can swim?
it was a combination of both. Like, I really liked French when I was studying it in high school and middle school. So, like, outside of the regular class assignments in eighth grade, I was like so bored because I was doing Rosetta Stone also for
Uh,
French at that point because my mom got it for me. She was like, "Oh, maybe this will help you, do better in your class." And I had like done the Rosetta Stone and then I was
really
bored in my
expensive.
class. Yeah. um, and I asked my teacher to like teach me new things. So he gave me the textbook for the following year and he would give me extra homework
Mm.
from like the following year stuff. So I ended up skipping a level of French and then finishing it 1 year early. So it's like
So then in that
I
last year, what did you do then? Did you carry on doing more French in your own time in that last year? Or
I actually interned for my French teacher and I helped her come up with like assignments for her classes and like helped her grade some things.
oh, would you
Um,
always like speak French with her and stuff then as well?
I tried, but for some reason, like speaking, I always am so embarrassed to
Mm.
speak in any language. And it's like the strangest thing. I don't know why it still happens. Like, even when I'm confident in it and I know that I can communicate rather decently, I still just kind of freak out. And I feel like I have
Mm.
to construct the sentence perfectly in my head before I say it. But then too much time goes by as I'm thinking about that. And then I just say it in English, just so it's like,
Yeah.
whatever. But yeah,
It's-
so I did not. I wrote emails with her in French, but I
uh,
didn't actually talk to her.
so that's quite interesting. So it really seems that did kind of put in a lot of effort yourself and kind of really go like out of your way to make the extra effort to try and like practice and use it and stuff. So I
Hmm.
think most people in the polyglot community, they all have the same story. It was like I did languages in school, I sucked at it, I failed all of them, and now I found the one magic method, and now classes suck, and if you use my method, you'll get fluent in a month or whatever, and they all have like the same
Hmm.
sales pitch or whatever. But I think it's interesting that you're actually quite different in the way that you had a lot of success with like languages in school as well, and
Hmm.
like I am the same as most people. Like I did French and German in school, and I scraped a C in both of them, mostly by getting really lucky by guessing multiple choice questions. Um, and I couldn't use either of them after that. But I think from listening to you, I think it's interesting to notice like the difference in attitude
Hmm.
between you compared to probably like most people like me back then. Is that I just wanted a C so I can forget about it and go on to stuff I liked more, like chemistry and physics and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Whereas you're actually like, well, like, no, I actually want to use French. So I think, yeah, I think it's shows a lot just how important the attitude is, and probably how that's more important than what
Mhm.
you do in some ways.
Yeah, definitely. I think that is one of the main reasons why like the school and classroom approach for languages doesn't work for a lot of people, especially because when they're introduced to it, they're children or like
Mm.
teenagers who typically don't care about anything, you know,
Yeah.
or they're not really shown the value of it or why it could be fun or important. And also, it really depends what kind of teacher you have. Like, the teacher can make it or break it for you. Like, I came into chemistry thinking, oh, I can't wait. But then my teacher was awful. And I ended up not understanding it well, despite like trying to go to extra helps and tutors and whatever. Now I just like, I have such a bad idea of chemistry in my head. Whereas
Mm.
physics, I had a phenomenal teacher and it made sense to me. And I was like excited about physics. And I was like, maybe I can even do that like in the future. Maybe I can major in physics, be a whatever. Um, but yeah, so I think I was really lucky that I also got along well with the teachers that I had and that they were good at their jobs
Mm.
too. So like it was the combination of my mindset going in that was positive and that, oh, I want to do this, plus the opportunity that the teacher was also very good and matched with me. So it's like
Mm.
both of those together was what produced, I think, a good result.
So was the teacher encouraging you to do like stuff on your own? Like, for example, I go to university now in NTNU in Taipei, and like we have classes and they're all in Chinese and stuff, and then the teacher would be like, they just say like little comments like, "Oh, you're not allowed to binge watch TV shows unless it's in Chinese. That's okay." And they just like say like just random comments like that, and they're always trying to like encourage people to like like go out and watch more stuff yourself. And like the book I'm reading at the moment was recommended by my teacher. I think they're like compared to here, they really seem to push and try and encourage the students to actively go out and do as much as they can. And they're
Hmm.
like, "Oh, you need to go out and make friends with Taiwanese people and all this stuff." Whereas
Hmm.
like when I was in school, they were like, "Right, make sure you learn this grammar rule for Wednesday and prepare this vocab." So I don't
Yeah.
know. Did your teacher like uh, push you to like go out and do more stuff in French, or was it kind of just the way they explained stuff was just so good that it organically like drew you more into French?
Um, so in the like grade school teachers, they were more like what you're referencing, that they're just like, here, guys, this is what work you have to do. Make sure you're not late. Like, you know, if you need help, come talk to me later. But they also had like really fun personalities. So I saw them as like nice teachers
Yeah.
that also makes sense. But they didn't encourage like doing anything extra. That was only in university, where if you're taking a language, you're taking that completely by choice. It's not, you know, mandatory that you do so. So there, the teachers know that, oh, if you're like, you know, taking Chinese, taking whatever, that you really want it for
Mm.
yourself. So like, here's the movie you might want to watch. I watched it like last night, thought it was great.
Yeah.
So like they did things like that, or they would send us like songs that they were interested in, you know. So they were very different in that sense. But
Yeah,
yeah.
I feel it's an unfair comparison for me to compare teaching a bunch of uninterested school
Hmm.
kids to comparing people that literally flew to Taiwan for the purpose of learning Chinese.
Yeah.
Like, it's obviously easier to teach the latter, so that's interesting. So then you did your French debate class as like an optional extra or elective in when you were in university, and then after that, so
Yeah.
so apart
Um,
from English, Russian, Italian, and French, what other languages do you have experience with?
so in high school, I took Latin for 2 years, I think. three
Oh,
years? I don't know. Something like that. I ended up actually deciding, well, okay, the reason I started learning Latin was kind of stupid. I mean, not stupid, but there's a standardized test that everyone in the United States has to take to get into college.
mm,
It's called the SAT. And a big chunk of it is knowing a lot of vocabulary and being able to do like reading comprehension and picking out like the right word that corresponds with something. So I was like, oh, Latin, that would be really helpful for being able to know new words that I don't know in English. So I literally just took it for that purpose. But then I ended up really falling in love with Latin too. Um, well, I really liked my teacher also. He was like,
Mm.
actually, what's interesting, most people really didn't like him because he was a hard ass and he was really serious about like people learning and not slacking off, or like he hated the students who were just there to like take it as an easy class. And I was actually his favorite student because I was the one also like trying really hard and being really interested in it. Um, but I think what's interesting, just as a random thought, also between Latin and Russian, is that um, they both are kind of structured in similar ways,
Oh,
in the
really?
sense, yeah, in the sense that so Russian, um, we, what are they called? I'm sorry. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Let me close the window real quick. One second.
Sounds quite lively outside. I thought everyone would be staying indoors.
Yeah, so that's actually every 8 p.m. every day. In Seattle, everybody opens their windows of their apartments and we just make noise for like 2 minutes or so for the all the people
Like in
working
like
hard on the
the
front lines for
okay.
coronavirus. Yeah.
I think there's
So
a
I
similar thing.
usually,
Like we all clapped for the NHS in the UK. Well, not me because I live in Taiwan, but everyone else did.
yeah. Yeah, I usually like poke my head out and scream too, but not tonight.
Wait till tomorrow, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what I was saying though was that so in Russian we also have like a bunch of different declensions
Mm.
for words, and that's like for adjectives, nouns, verbs, whatever, where you will decline the word to give it like meaning of the context.
Mm.
So in English, it's a very the sentence meaning is really determined by like the order in which you put the words to determine who's the subject, who's the object, like directionality. But in Russian and in Latin, it's different because you can put all the words in absolutely any order and it will mean the same thing.
Oh,
So
really?
that was like a concept that I was able to understand really easily. I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Obviously, it's complicated remembering how to decline all of the words, but yeah, I still found that really fun doing the translations.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
your Russian background helps a lot with Latin, and I guess probably Italian and French would have helped with vocabulary, I guess, as well, and
Hmm.
maybe English to an extent. So it probably would have given you quite a big head start, maybe
Yeah.
over some of the other students. That's cool. So then after, I'm trying to remember what we were talking about before. You're in French. You joined the debate class,
Hmm.
or and then after that, you carried on with French throughout the whole time you were at uni, did you? And then after that, you got into Chinese, or how does it
So
progress
yeah,
after
so
that?
so after that class, I really didn't like my teacher of that class, and she kind of killed my motivation to continue taking any of her following
Oh
classes.
wow.
I was like, all right, I'm done. um, so I just started focusing on like actual, my major based classes and things like that.
Which was computer science.
Yeah. So I started focusing more on that and like kind of putting languages and everything of that like on the back burner. I just like completely forgot about that. Um, and then suddenly in like junior year or so, I like felt really weird about myself because language learning and like just having some part of me that is, I don't know, like engaging with languages. That was like completely gone for like over a year, probably like 2 years at that point. And I just felt really weird about myself that like something was really missing, that I wasn't like doing something that I really loved. So I felt like, okay, this is the time for me to finally learn Chinese because I've been wanting to do that for so long. Because in high school, actually, I tried to self-study Chinese for a couple of months. I
Mm.
did try. I tried to do actually also Rosetta Stone for Chinese, and I think I got through like level 1, but it was really, honestly, I'm gonna say like it was really hard to do it by myself without any teacher, without any like auxiliary support or like
Mm.
human to ask questions to. Especially because I really wanted to like do everything at once. I wanted to learn the characters and the pinyin and the pronunciation and the tones and the, how to speak and get I wanted to do everything right right off
Mm.
the bat. And you can set that up in Rosetta Stone, but
Because so Rosetta Stone's just entirely audio based, right?
it's audio based,
So there's no
but
characters.
well, so it's audio based, but it's also visual. So it's connecting visual with audio, essentially. So if you
Oh,
see
so
an
you have like do it on like a
image,
laptop or something?
yeah. So
So I
you
would
would
assumed
be
it was
on a
like a CD,
computer.
like Pimsleur or something. You just put it in and just listen to it. Okay, so
Oh,
it's more like
no.
listening and okay.
It's
And
like
you,
meant to teach you as you learned your first language by like associating sound with an image, but
like pictures of like an
accompanying
apple
that
or something.
image, yeah,
And
but
it'd say
accompanying
like,
that image, you'll have like also the writing
mm,
representation. So like in French, that was obvious because it's the same alphabet, right? But in Chinese, it was supplemented with the character. And I got bogged down by trying to also get the characters right from the very beginning without using pinyin at all. And that destroyed me. That like I couldn't do it at all, so I
mm.
just gave up.
And was there
Um,
simplified characters in Rosetta Stone?
hmm,
Okay.
yeah, you can choose.
And you also said, so what does it mean when you said you did level one? I've never used Rosetta Stone, so I
Oh,
don't really know how it
yeah.
works.
So they have 3 levels, and it's like a progression each level. And when you complete a level, it's like you will be able to do this, 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 and this.
Mm.
So, like, I don't know, talk about, introduce yourself, talk about, describe people. I don't know, like, I don't remember what it was anymore, but
Mm.
it's like
But
the
how many
levels
like
are kind
hours
of
of
like,
content is that like level one mean? Is it like 10 hours or like 1 hour? I don't know how much content's in one level.
it's hard to say it per hour because it takes everyone a different amount of time to
Oh,
get
right,
through them.
okay.
But it's like, uh, I truly don't remember.
Okay.
It's a long time to get through one level, though. I will
Okay,
say that.
okay. So, because it's not just like I don't know if you do like one level on Duolingo, it's like 5 minutes or something, isn't it? And you move on to the next one. So it's not like
Oh,
that. Yeah.
no, 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 no,
Yeah,
no, no.
it's quite a
It's like,
substantial amount.
yeah, I would compare it more closely to one level in Rosetta Stone is like completing one textbook.
Like a big. Okay.
Yeah.
So you did the most of level one on Mandarin Chinese with trying to do the pinyin and the simplified characters and the tones and the everything at the same time,
Yeah.
and then
And then gave
found the
up.
characters quite difficult. How did it go after that?
And then I gave up on Chinese for probably like 5 years. And then I decided to
Oh
take
no.
it in college. In my junior year, I just started taking like beginner Chinese. And oh my God, I think that was my favorite class in like all of university. It was phenomenal. We had 4 different teachers, so we could hear 4 different voices and styles of teaching. Um, and it was every single day. And we had homework every single day. And they were like really strict with us. The whole class, as much as possible that we could at that point, um, it would all be taught in Chinese. We would have to ask questions in Chinese. So it was like going into Chinese mode for 60 minutes every day.
Mm.
And it was really like, I think their method of teaching and just everything about how they structured it and how very organized it was fantastic. So I think that's why I was really Like, honestly, that's why I think I ended up with such a good level of it after just those 2 years.
It's quite interesting because a lot of people have told me like, oh, I go to like do these immersion sort of classes. They say they like, oh no, that's. I've heard. I think I've heard someone say like, unless you're like B1 or B2 or above, you can't do it or some stuff like that. And I've also heard people say like, oh no, but without English explanations, I can't understand it properly. But I had a similar experience with you in the way that if I had someone go, no, this is the past participle or something, and they explain something in English, I'm just like, I don't know what any of those words mean. But
Not
like,
even in English.
yeah,
Yeah.
but then if someone just goes, if someone does explaining in Chinese, they can just basically go, oh well, you put this bit after this bit, and then here's like loads of different examples of how to use it in context, and you can just kind of like flood your brain with like, oh, okay, that's how it's used, and then they go and don't use it like this because this is wrong. And I find it actually helps like quite a lot more than just them giving me some like waffly explanation in English, because like, and sometimes they like write on the board like letters, like they said something like, was it, they put like RE on the board. I was like, what does RE mean? She was like, resultative ending. I was just like, 是什么东西? And she was just like,
I'm sorry, you cut out for like the past 20 seconds.
oh gosh, what was the last thing you heard?
The last thing I heard was like resultative complement or ending. And then
Oh,
you're
so
like, 这是什么东西? And then I couldn't hear the rest.
that's basically the important part.
Okay.
and, and then she just gave an example of like what it was in the sentence, and I was like, you should have just led with that because that makes way more sense than some weird English jargon that I've never heard before.
Hmm.
So I actually found it really good, the like the immersive approach, and I think it because in the because the teacher can like, they can give you like single English words if they need to, or they can like use like hand motions. Like if they're talking about bar or something, they can like go, oh, it's like this, and then they can like do like visual demonstrations to help you understand as well. I feel like you get used to it quite quickly, and it's not actually as intimidating as people think.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so you did that for 2 years in college, and then you went to China for a bit. Did you?
No,
No,
I've never
it's
been.
all in the
No.
US.
Yeah.
Okay.
I really wish I wanted to go, but I couldn't. So what I wanted to do was there was a program that my Chinese teachers were like really trying to convince all of us to apply for, which was called so my teachers, they were really trying to convince us all to apply to this program called Princeton in Beijing,
Mhm.
PIB. It was the acronym. And it was the summer program where you like really expedite your whole like Chinese learning because it's also completely immersive. And also, I think you're supposed to not speak English at all during that time with like your classmates, like only if you're like calling your mom or something, then sure. But other than that, you're supposed to completely immerse yourself and theoretically like skip a whole year of Chinese when you come back. So they were all like really hoping we would all do that. But I was doing tech internships because I was like, my career is more important.
Yeah,
Got to do that.
just a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So instead, I was doing my internships and I just didn't have any opportunity to not do that. And
Mm.
so, yeah. And right now, I don't know when I'll be able to go to China
So are you working
because
now?
I am working. Yeah.
Okay. So how did you get so into linguistics, and then wondering where that fits into it?
Um, yeah. So when I was
Did you
applying,
study it before? No, just kind
well,
of you.
not before college, not formally anyway. So
Okay.
like when I was applying to colleges, I was trying to think like, oh, what makes me different from
Mm.
everybody else? And I was like, oh, probably the languages thing. So I was thinking like, I guess maybe I can do something with that. So I thought, okay, well, you can't major in languages.
Mm.
And I feel like that would be not weird, but not really convincing to a university to tell them, oh, I want to go here because I want to major in like XYZ language. So I said that I was going to major in linguistics in like these colleges.
Mm.
Um, And so I didn't end up doing that, but I did take a lot of linguistics classes while there. So I would be like almost confident to say that I have a minor in linguistics, just
Okay.
unofficially. Yeah.
Then that's kind of given you enough background information to at least kind of dive into the research and have a look yourself for what you're interested in.
Mhm. We were talking about linguistics, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I think what I was going to say was that I what actually I have no idea what I was saying anymore. I think I was trying to say something like, "Oh yeah, it was really interesting to learn about the science behind just how the learning happens and
Mm,
why languages are the way they are and how you can look at them scientifically." So I was looking at them from like a very academic and scientific perspective as opposed to just
mm.
the, casual language learning perspective that I had always only really known it from.
Yeah, it
So,
gives you kind of two perspectives. Do you find that like that academic perspective combined with your like personal experience can help when you're trying to like so I'm assuming you still do a lot of self-study now for like different
mhm.
languages. So do you find that helps a lot?
Yeah, I think especially if you don't already have experience studying a lot of different languages that have different sounds and everything that you can write, it really helps you understand how to create sounds from a different language and how to practice hearing them to make a
Mm,
distinction. Like for example, in like Chinese, you know how there's like the zhi, zhi, whatever, like all those different
mm,
um, sounds, like, or even just the difference between z, zh, like those. A
mm.
lot of my classmates,
Sound
when
quite
in
similar.
beginner Chinese, yeah, they couldn't distinguish them. They couldn't like, or at least they could hear the difference, but they can't hear that they're not making. They can't hear like the acute like little differences, or even like ooh, ooh. They can't do that.
I
So
feel like it's hard to hear your voice accurately a lot of the time because you have
mhm.
like you almost have like a perception of what your voice sounds like in your head. And then when
Yeah,
you like it's like when you listen to your recording for the first time, you're like, wait, is that what it sound like?
you're like
And then
ew.
yeah. So I feel like we have an idea of what a voice sounds like. So a lot of the time it's like it's right in your head and then you listen to it back and you're like, oh shit, I was way off, you know? And then
Hmm.
you can watch like a recording of yourself speaking like I did not realize I was that far off or like stuff. So
Yeah, but for so like what I was trying to say with that is that in linguistics, the intro to linguistics, one of the first things we did was we got acclimated to using the IPA, International
mm.
Phonetic Alphabet. So for all of those sounds, there is a representation. So it's like you have to really be able to hear the difference. And we would like take words and transcribe them into what the real sound is according to that.
So to learn the IPA, you have to learn like every possible sound in every language and to hear them.
Well, we only did it for English because in that class, in the intro class, we didn't really work with other languages, really, just to keep it simple since it was just intro
But
class.
so like there was so for the IPA, I'm assuming there's lots of symbols that are not needed to be used for English. So you just didn't learn those symbols.
Yeah, like we were shown them and we were told that, like, okay, these are other ones that are specific to this language or this language, and this is like the global one for most sounds. But we're just going to work with this one so that grading is not a nightmare.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did you apply that to Chinese then? Did you use IPA or did you go with Pinyin? Because I find Pinyin is like a really
I,
weird system they use for like, especially with like the U dot dot, and it's like, oh, if it's a after this they remove the
oh,
amount and stuff. I'm just like, they, if they
yeah.
wanted to, they could have made it a lot simpler. Like when you're
Mhm.
typing on phone, you just use a
Oh,
V or
the
something
NV.
instead, and it's
Oh,
like,
I didn't understand that for the longest time. So I just like
I was
I
just like,
had
how
to
do I
change the
type?
keyboard to the handwriting one whenever I wanted to write new because I never knew that it was the V. Like that's not intuitive, I think.
Yeah, I found
But
Pinion's a nightmare. I feel like they could have done a lot better job, and how it's the standardized one. I'm like, how did that happen?
I
It's
don't know.
rubbish as a system.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I did use Pinyin, but in the beginning, when I was distinguishing between the sounds, I actually used Russian characters sometimes. Um,
Okay.
because in Russian, we do have a lot of those different like consonant sounds.
Mm.
So,
I actually found. Have you heard of Juyin or Bopomofo?
mm-mm.
It's something that you use in like Taiwan, and if I can see my keyboard, but it's basically kind of like distilled version of the characters, which they
Uh,
use to like. It's similar to the hiragana or something in Japanese in the way that it's just like derived from the characters, but it's also like a phonetic representation of the sound. So it's kind of like the Taiwanese own version of pinyin that like native
mm,
speakers grow up using here. And I
mm-hmm,
find like in terms of the way the sounds are represented, I feel like it's a lot more accurate than pinyin.
mm,
So I started learning that when I went off because I was like, no, this is what natives use. It's obviously better. When I went to university and every resource you buy is use pinyin, I was like, oh yeah, I should probably use pinyin then. And now I've basically
mm-hmm.
almost completely forgot how to use both Pofu, but I
Oh,
think it's
that's
interesting
okay.
because you watch a lot of this is a bit of a tangent, but you watch like YouTubers online and they have like the subtitles and stuff, and a lot of the time they add the Bopomofu in for like sound effects, like in comic books it'd be like pow or
Mm,
whatever, or they'd
mm-hmm,
just be like if you speak to a Taiwanese person, they're like Bushidawa, and they're like they'd use like the Bopomofu character for it or something,
mm,
and like loads of stuff like that. And sometimes if I was watching like a comedian on YouTube called Borten, and he was like making a joke about like predictive text on his phone about how he went to see was in this restaurant, and it gave him some pretty horrific suggestions, and it was going off that. But I thought that you could only understand the joke if you knew the Bopomofu. So I think it was worth
yeah.
learning if you're interested in Taiwanese.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just everything uses pinyin. Like,
Yeah. I think that is because they made it like standardized and also it's easier for other people who are already familiar with the Latin alphabet to get into. But yeah.
I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing because like the way you pronounce the letters if you're reading pinyin, like if you go, I don't know, if you would pronounce like ni hao in if you read it like English, it'd be like nai hao or something. I don't know. I feel like if you use like English to read it, it just sounds weird.
That's
So it
true. I
almost
mean,
like leads you down the wrong
yeah.
route. I don't know what you think about that.
I think that I think you need to like put your brain in different context. When you read the pinyin, you have to like put it in Chinese mode and like rewire which sound it's representing really in that moment. So I think it like by pinyin using the Latin alphabet, it like removes that barrier of entry for people who do use that. They're like, oh yeah, I can read that. Or like most likely they would people learning it, like English speaking people learning Chinese, they
Mm.
would probably do that anyway, but it would be their own personal pinyin, right?
Yeah,
So I
I've seen
think
that a lot
it's
with
like,
Cantonese, and it's a nightmare. Like, people just make
yeah.
up their own, and like I got an email from one of my subscribers to my website, and it did a message in like Ping or like Cantonese opinion and texted me, and I was just like, I don't really understand what you're trying to say here. I can understand maybe like 50% of it from like
Oh
guessing,
God.
and then the other
Hmm.
50%, I was like, I asked my girlfriend because she's from Hong Kong. I was like, do you know what this means? And she was like, nope, that's Martian. I was like, okay, brilliant.
Yeah, no, because like I almost wish that Russian had like a pinyin for it because whenever people write like the phonetic version of
Mm,
Russian, always different. And on like that, because I was born in Russia and my name is like originally in the Cyrillic alphabet, when I came to the United States and like as I had to get documents updated, every time that I would have something updated, the phonetic transcription, depending on the person, would be different. So at one point, I had like identification documents that all had a different spelling of all of my name. And
that's
so
right.
when I had to go to like the DMV, which is the basically where you get a driver's license,
Mm.
I couldn't get it because they were like, "Oh, your name doesn't match on these documents," and I'm like, "But I can't do anything about that." So that's
Wow,
why I
I
still
never really
can't
thought
drive.
about that. Wait, it's still now you still haven't got it sorted yet?
No, I mean the
Ah, that's
documents are sorted out, but I've just never gotten around to it
okay.
anymore.
That's a good excuse. You can just keep on your back pocket and be like, yeah, it's because the government messed up my name transcription, so it's not my
My
fault.
documents. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Mm, that's
Uh,
interesting. So after you just trying to remember what we were talking about before. So after you said you did two years of Chinese class, which you said was quite successful
mhm.
with like this whole almost like immersive approach, like all using Chinese in class and then give you homework and stuff to do every day. How did you find tackling the characters at the
Mhm.
time? And I'm assuming again that simplified characters because I think
Yeah.
most schools in the UK and America go with simplified because it's like, well, China's huge, right? And Hong
Yeah.
Kong, Macau, Taiwan, whatever, are quite small
Mhm.
comparatively. So,
Yeah, so in my class, we had the option to do either one, and the class would be taught the same. It's just the presentations they would have, half of it was written in the simplified, the other half in a different color in the traditional. So students who were picked whatever could still, I chose simplified because I thought that would be easier.
uh,
You know, that was literally the only reason. Um,
I'm curious
so,
if I'm curious. Do you have any experience with the traditional now? Because sometimes I look at I'm really bad with simplified. I can like guess a few
mhm.
based on like well some of it like a lot of the
Some
characters
of them
are
are the
exactly the
same.
same. I think it's like
Yeah.
most of them are actually exactly the same. But
Hmm.
like some of them simplified and you can say like this bit always simplifies to that bit and you can kind of tell. But then other
Hmm.
ones I look and they look completely different. Like
Yeah.
I think the first time I saw the simplified character for like Ting, like to listen, and it was like almost like the little axe and a mouth. I was just like, but that when I was learning the one for like traditional, it makes sense. You've got like, the ear in there, you've got like heart, and you've got some other stuff. You can like come up with a little story in your head. But
Hmm.
then it's just like I looked at the simplified one. Yeah, what was it? What was this? And then, yeah, I was wondering what you thought about
Um, well, I guess since I started out just like doing the simplified initially, they just kind of made sense in their own way.
that.
Um, like, uh, like sometimes the teacher, when we had some free time, like if we finished the lesson early for the day, he'd be like, "Give me a character, let me break it down for you," and we would just like give him characters from the vocab of that chapter we were going through. He would write it on the board and then he would like take it apart and be like, "This, what does this mean? This means coal, so it's da 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 da," and then like this one, this whatever. So and we would always be mesmerized by that, like
Mm.
how cool that was. But I didn't actually, I didn't really break them down myself or try to understand them that much with like the radicals or like what the components were.
So were you
I
writing as
mostly,
well, or was it just were you writing as well?
yeah,
It's just brute
everything.
force, then I guess.
Yeah, so like because so the structure for like a week would be we'd start a lesson on Monday. We would have like I don't know about 15 characters that would be on a dictation on Tuesday,
It's like
and we'd
sentences or
also
single characters.
it would be single characters for the dictation. At least that was in the first year. Then the second
Mm.
year would be full sentences, which that made it so much harder. But so for the single characters, you'd have to like memorize the character, the
Mm.
pinyin, and the translation into English. And you'd have to remember all 15 for the next day. And they would just pick five and they would say it aloud, maybe give you a sentence to hint at the what it means.
Because there's like a lot
Um,
of homonyms and stuff. So,
yeah,
but
so I just kind of like I think it was through the fact that every day I had to like sit with them for a very long
mm.
time and just memorize them in some way. Also, that they just kept repeating, and that it was every single day that I was like reading stuff with them, using them, writing them, just
So
like that, like mass exposure and stuff that. made me learn them
Mm.
better.
Did
Yeah.
you find then like the because my background's with when I first got uploading Chinese characters is quite different. I initially went through a book called Remembering Traditional Hanzi by James Heisig, which I'm not sure if you've heard of. Subscribers from my channel probably have. It's basically there was a I'm probably going to tell his story wrong now, but it was something along the lines of this. There was a professor who went to Japan to study the Joyo kanji, which is something I think about 2,200-ish kanji, which is supposed to make up like 99% of written Japanese, I think. Someone
Mhm.
can correct me if I'm wrong on that. It probably below they normally do. Um, and then he supposedly learnt to write all of those characters in a month. And then like after that, people were asking him about his methods and like, oh, what did you do? It seems, and he was almost embarrassed to say at first because his methods were like really, he thought at the time were really childish. Like he was coming up with loads of really silly and immature stories to help him remember the characters and stuff like that.
Oh,
And
like
eventually,
mnemonics. Yeah.
yeah, and eventually he turned it into a book for Japanese, and then they later got adapted. It was two books, and they later got adapted into Chinese as well. So I used the first one for Chinese, which basically starts off with like really really simple ones, like tree, 1 to 10, fire, person, water, mouth, moon, sun, and
Hmm.
then for example you learn like you learn like say sun, this is sun, this is moon, and then the next page it'd be like, oh, this is the one for like clear, like Ming by the Ming, and you can see it's
Hmm.
just them stuck together. So you start off
Hmm.
with a really like simple characters, and it all seems like, oh well, this one is just those things plus together.
Hmm.
Um, but then I find a lot of the bad thing about the I'm not sure if this is a bad thing, but it's just like because you're learning it away from pronunciation, it's just the
Hmm.
characters, so you kind of learn
Mm.
you assume everything's meaning plus meaning equals meaning, but like the majority of Chinese characters have a sound element in there as well. And you
Hmm.
kind of didn't really realize that until I started reading a lot later and be like, oh, well, that character's actually like this because that bit's the sound, and it's nothing to do with this wacky story that I made up before.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
I was wondering if through your like mass exposure, as you said, if you got kind of got used to stuff and your brain started like naturally picking up patterns, like, oh, I've seen this element on the right before, like this sounds like this, and then this is a bit for water on the left or whatever. So it's just it's the same. It's from the left is the meaning for that, and the right must be the sound. If you like naturally started to like pick up patterns like that, or if it was something that you just had to like work out.
Um, Honestly, that like whole understanding that that was even a thing that you can do came super late for me. That was in my like uh third or fourth semester. So like 3 quarters into the 2 years of
Wait,
my
so
study, that's
semester like a third of a year,
a half.
half a year. Okay,
Well, technically, yeah. Um, I guess a third because you have the summer, which is not included.
okay, half
So
of the
sure,
academic year.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that came super late to me. And when I realized that, I was like, wow, I could have had this memorizing stuff like so much easier if I had just maybe paid attention to that a little bit more. Um, because like I was literally just trying to put together some kind of like, neuron connection between this character, this sound, and this meaning. And it was like, that worked and it worked fine, especially oh my god. And other thing that helps so much is when you have a consistent, what is it, stroke order, so that you always write the character the same exact way. So sometimes if I can't like really remember how to write a character, I'll like start writing it and then I'll just finish it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
whoa. I don't know if that's ever happened to you. And I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that looks right. Um,
This
but
is sometimes it happens, and sometimes I was like, I can't remember the left side of the character, but I can remember the right side of the character.
yeah.
So I'd write on the right side first. I'd be like, oh, the left side's this, and I'd write that after. I'd be like, oh,
Mhm.
that stroke order's completely wrong, but at least I got the characters.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've totally done that on like Chinese tests. I would like only remember part of it and I would just write that and not write anything else.
what I've done in tests as well. Maybe this seems like a bit cheating, but because all of the exam paper and questions are written all in Chinese, if I forget how to write a character, I'm just looking at the questions like it must be written somewhere around
Oh,
here.
I did that. Yeah, I totally used the test to take the test. Yeah.
That's quite interesting. So
Yeah.
how would you say it is for you now then? Because I I went through all of that book with Heisig, and I found I could learn. And I had them all based up set in Anki flashcards. So at the point I could, based on this English keyword, say if it was like tree, you'd write out the one that looks like a tree. Not like
Hmm.
shoe, it was like mu, like it's the one that actually looks like a tree. And then I'd be able to write that from the English keywords, and then I'd be like, say if I was to remember how to say like writing out a sentence and had to say something that used to move, I don't know, like move chai, like firewood or something, and I'd be like writing out the sentence, but oh wait, how do I write this character again? So I found that the A didn't really translate that well to B, and it wasn't until I had a lot of practice, until I came to Taiwan after and started writing out a lot of sentences in hand,
Hmm.
that I actually started getting better at it. But like even now, I'd be writing, and like some of the characters I forget are like some of the most common ones still, and like I can get
Hmm.
like a whole sentence and be like, wait, 偏离是什么? And be like, just some really common characters of that I just forget a lot of the time.
Hmm.
So I was wondering what your experience is with that,
With
or
with
just
the
writing
part
in
where,
general,
oh, writing. Yeah, I
or if it's
don't.
something that's not that important, because I don't think it's as important as reading either.
Yeah, like especially I remember I was actually in this when I started the second year of Chinese in school, I was like kind of getting overwhelmed with how many characters I had to like write because and I went to my professor during her office hours and I was like, I'm really struggling to like recall how to write these characters. I can recognize them, but I can't like
Mm.
generate it usually. Like if you show it to me, I'm like, I know I can read that. Um, and then she was like, honestly, like if you're gonna talk about practicality and like Chinese further, you don't really need to know how to write them by hand because everything is keyboards and pinyin mostly and
Yeah,
like pronunciation based. So as long as you just know how to recognize and read, so she was like, that's the most important thing. Um, but you know, for the class, you got to do
yeah.
it anyway. Um,
It's
but
kind of like
like,
what they say here as well.
yeah, but like for me, one of my best ways of learning anything is to write. So like rewriting stuff, that was one of my main ways of like studying, just rewriting something constantly and just like having the muscle memory, also like the visual again and the repetition.
So
But
when you did that,
also
would you find you just looked at it and copied it out, or would you kind of actually try to like focus on the character, but like try to like notice the little bits? Because I find if sometimes I find if I just write it out, I can copy that character 10 times, turn the page, and then forget it. But if I
mhm,
just stop and say like 10 seconds, let me just look at the character and just try to notice what bits make it up,
mhm,
and then write it out. Even if you only write
mhm.
out 2 or 3 times, I find the situation B for me seems to make it stick better. I don't know if that's the same with you, your experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I would do that too. Like I would if I had a list of 10 characters I have to remember. So it would be like character and opinion and I would not write the English just because I would try to just have that like already memorized somehow. So I would write the whole list on like one row of the paper. Then I would, in the second row, write them all again. Then I would close that. I would write the pinyin, and then I would try to write the character as much as I can. And then I would just do that for all of them. And each time that I got stuck, or like if I got it wrong, I would like circle that and circle the specific radical or the specific stroke that was wrong. Or if the whole thing was wrong, like circle the whole thing and then I would rewrite that one. I would like focus like what part of that was wrong. Why is okay, it's this, it's this, it's this. Rewrite that a bunch of times. Do the whole list over again. Because um, for me, I found that the more that I would also delay that like rewriting it, like obviously if I just rewrote it 5 times, I think I can the sixth time turn the page and write it correctly because it's like really fresh in my mind.
But then
But if I
like wait
write
a
out the
minute
whole
and
thing,
then yeah.
But you rewrite all of the other words, and like I'm thinking about those, being distracted, forgetting temporarily the other one, and then come back to it and try to write it. If I can write it then and repeat that whole process a couple of times, I think I'm good.
Yeah.
At least for like the next, I don't know, short-term period of time that I need to know it for.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense because like the the longer the period of time is until you last successfully record it to when you record it the next time, the
Hmm.
longer that period is, the longer you can retain it in your head for the next time. So
Hmm.
like what I normally did when I got practice, or when I'm practicing for what I think share now, or the dictation, is that I'd write out. We have like a practice book here. Oh, shit, I just dropped a charge on the floor. Wait, I'll just get a fresh one. So we have like 10 columns like that. And what I'd do is
Hmm.
I'd write in 4 of the columns here, just try and copy it out on like day one and try to notice the characters and fill out like the first 4 columns. And then like 24 hours later on the day two, I'd like cover up that and then try to recall that from memory. And then
Hmm.
after I write it out once, if I get it right, I'll just fill out the rest of the column. And if I get it wrong, I'll just go on to the next one. And then and then normally like say I get like 80% of them right, then I know like there's like a few characters I got wrong. I can just focus on the ones I got wrong and try to do it that way. And I
Hmm.
feel like having that like gap between when I first did it to when I did it the second time helps me retain it a bit longer.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, totally.
because otherwise I just write it out and then forget it, and then even if the test is like an hour later, I'll still forgot it by the time it's a test. Like, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how that works. It's especially sad when you have like kind of learned one of those and you think you're confident in it and you've written it, but then like after some time, it's one that you thought you were confident about and then you just can't remember it.
oh yeah, yeah. That's happened
Like
to me a few
especially the
times.
easy ones that you just said, like pianyi, like you just, I
It's
don't
just
even
like,
know how to write it right now. If I see it, I'm gonna be like, I know that,
yeah,
but
it's because the first character is pronounced bien, I think, half the time, and pin the other time, so it confuses me, and I'm like, wait, is it that one? Yeah,
uh,
but anyway, yeah, I find that quite funny, and also a lot of the time I'm like, yeah, like when I first came, I was like, yeah, I have the characters down, I can write them out all by hand, and then in the teacher, the teacher was like, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, wait, what the fuck did you just say? Oh shit, I should have listened to the dialogue as well.
yeah.
That was
Oh
quite.
man. Yeah, but also just like the speed, something that um, kind of like was really shocking to me was, I mean, this is like across any language, I think, but
Mm,
um, especially Chinese. There are so many different ways that people from different places in China will pronounce the same thing.
mm,
Like my teachers, they all pronounce things in like the northern Beijing accent.
mm.
So like the ZH pinyin, that would be like zhe, like right. But my boyfriend, I think his family is like from the southern somewhere part.
Mm.
So like if I were to say 这是, he would say like 这是. And then because of that, whenever I try to speak Chinese with him or just like practice or like ask him, oh, how do you say this? I couldn't understand him half the
Mm.
time because I was like only understanding a certain meaning with like that very particular pronunciation. And
Yeah.
because of him and how he pronounces it, like other people in the world that I've encountered that speak Chinese, they all pronounce it like with a lot of variation too. So I've had to like open up all the different sounds that can mean this thing. So it's like it was so hard though for me to
Yeah.
have done that. Yeah.
I think what I've heard is that because originally there was like so many different languages in China, and there still is now. Well, they call them dialects. It depends
Yeah.
which what do you want to call it, like languages. Then, they all influence their like Chinese how they speak Chinese. And I find with young people, it's I guess less influenced. But a lot of people in Taiwan, I'm used to the Taiwanese accent, or like, but even then, it's like people that speak. Most of the people I speak to are younger people, and they have like a less strong Taiwanese accent because they've been speaking like Mandarin from a young age. But then if I speak to someone like a bit older, like for example, they don't pronounce the sh sound properly. It's all s. So like
Mm.
I'd go to a store and I'd be like, how much is this? And they'd be like, oh, it's s. I'm like, wait, 444. Well,
What?
shit. Well, shit. It's like they're meant to say 是 but they say 是 I'm like 是
Yeah.
eh? 444. They're like 不是啊，不是啊，哦，不是啊. It's like this is just
Yeah.
so confusing. Like,
Hmm.
and then because
Same
and
thing. Yeah.
then you really have to like just can rely completely on the tones because then you have to like okay, well that's just not pronouncing the sh sound properly. And then like a
Mm.
week ago, I went on. There's an online game you can download on Steam called VR Chat, and I went on just to went in one of like the Chinese worlds just to try and like practice a little bit. And I
Mhm.
found there was like loads of people from different. And I'm used to mostly 90% of what I watched was like from Taiwan, and there were some people that sounded very Beijing, and I was like, wait. I can kind of sort of understand, but it takes a lot of mental energy, and then again, it's not as clear as if it's something I'm used to. So it's like
Mhm.
really, yeah, it's
Yeah.
just sure quite.
Yeah. Do you think it's like equally hard for learners of English to understand like American English, British English, Australian English, all the different ones?
I think if you're talking about standard American English versus standard British English, I don't think the differences are that bad. But if you
Hmm.
talk about like, I don't know, standard American English versus like a strong Texas accent, or like you go up to like
Mm.
Glasgow and Newcastle and have a really strong accent, or like Liverpool or something, because in situations like that, if they have a strong, for example, Glaswegian accent or Geordie accent in Newcastle, a lot of English
Hmm.
people don't understand what they're saying very well, let alone a
Yeah.
foreigner. So it's like,
Yeah.
and some of the sounds sound completely different. It's like when I went to Newcastle for university, which is the most northern city in England, they'd say stuff like instead of film, that'd be like film. I'm like, what the fuck's a film? Why added a U in that? Like, it's like if and they use like slang and stuff I've never heard before.
Hmm.
Like, and just use those of words. I was like, wait, what does that mean? My friend was like, oh, go
Hmm.
on, grab us a tinny, will you? I'm like, a tinny? What's a tinny? They're like, get me a can of beer. I'm like, oh, a can, tinny. I'm like, okay, like, so it confused me. So I
Yeah.
imagine for um, like ESL speakers, it'd be really hard. And when my girlfriend first arrived to Newcastle, she's originally from Hong Kong and arrived to Newcastle. She said, like, I mean, maybe you don't because you're a love languages so much, but if there's someone speaking a language you don't know in the background, a lot of the time you just kind of zone it out as white background noise.
Mm,
She did
yeah.
that with like Geordie speaking English because she just assumed it wasn't English. I was like, no, that is English.
Oh, wow.
She's like, really? It's like, yeah.
Hmm.
So I think
Yeah, wow.
I think it'll be really hard for English as well.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you actually like I'm sure you've like spoken Chinese with a lot of different kinds of people. Do you have trouble understanding people who are like learning Chinese when they speak it?
So can you say that again? Trouble understanding. It cut out a bit the internet.
Like people who are learning Chinese as their like foreign language.
Mm.
Like, do you have any trouble understanding them? Because a lot of times for me, I couldn't understand what my classmates were saying. Like, I could
Um,
understand myself and I could understand my teacher, but I couldn't understand my classmates. But the teachers could.
I found if it's if, for most of them, I think it's fine. If like it's another Western person like from American or English, I find even if their like English accent's really strong, I can understand it okay because it's like it's coming from the same accent as me.
Mm.
And when I spoke to some of other people, like some students from India or Indonesia, I had a really hard time understanding because they weren't pronouncing a lot of sounds the same as what I was used to, and it took me a while to
Mm.
get used to that accent. And I'm really used to how the way Japanese people speak Chinese now, because like in every single class at the start, like the majority of students were Japanese, so that's like really easy for me now. Even if they mess up the R and L sound up, I can still more or less know what they're saying because I'm just so used to hearing them speak. But I find now most of the students have like pretty good pronunciation, so it's fine. Apart from maybe like one or two, then I see one girl in my class now that I kind of really struggle to understand what she says because she has a really heavy accent, but the others I think is fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
But I feel like we're on like, I guess because we're on classes, like there's like 6 books in total, and they say it's supposed to be in line with CEFR, which I completely disagree with. They said, oh, when you complete book 6, you're supposed to be a C2. I'm like, okay, I don't believe that for a second. But we've just started book 5 now, so it's supposed to be. They're like, oh, you're supposed to be like up for advanced or whatever going into this. I'm just like, I know I'm nowhere near a C1 level in Chinese. This is just like, I think it's absurd to suggest if you complete 5 textbooks you'd be a C1. But I'm just starting book 5, and I feel like we're at least like good, solid intermediate. So I feel like most people are like got the pronunciation down pretty well. But sometimes if I say a word I'm not familiar with and I'm trying to speak, sometimes I just like mess up the pronunciation a little bit, or like if I say a word, sometimes I actually swap the characters around in my head and say the word backwards, and then people don't understand what I'm saying. I don't know why my brain does that, but
I've done that. I've also said like completely different words and thinking that I'm saying like I have messed up qinghua and xigua.
Oh, like you try to buy like a lemon, like a watermelon, and you got given like a frog or something at the market.
Yeah, I was trying to say that I was like, my favorite thing to eat is like for dessert is the watermelon. I said frog. Everyone looked at me weird, and I was like,
say what?
Yeah. That's funny. I think it's like because they're the same tone and like kind of same musicality that you're just like stored in my brain in the same place.
It's weird though. Weird, like I don't know why my brain does it. It just comes up with some weird stuff sometimes. Like I was in class and I meant to say Zhou Jie, which is like to like tangle stuff up. It's like Zhou Fen de Zhou, and then Jie Shu de Jie ma, 应该是. But then I said it the back to front. I was like Jie Zhou, and my teacher was like Jie Zhou Jie Zhou 是什么? I was like, wait, Zhou Jie. It's like, oh, 我知道. I was like, oh, okay. Wait, why did my brain? And that happens like quite a lot where my brain just says the characters to the back to front for some weird reason. It just swaps them around, and I have no idea why. But
I don't know. Yeah, that's okay. At least you said like the right two, characters. Yeah.
But for some words, if it's the same characters and you swap them around back to front, it changes the meaning and it can mean something else. True. So like, yeah. But I feel like it's for words that like I've maybe read in a book and like seen like once or twice, or like I've heard like once or twice before, and I'm just kind of like grasping at straws trying to remember what it's like. And then like the more familiar a word is, I find it just I'm not going to mess up ni hao because you've heard it like a billion times.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, that's true. Do you have any words that you just can never remember, no matter how many times you've seen them?
There's a few. I would give an example, but I can't think of the top of my head.
Obviously.
So, yeah. There was oh yeah, I was reading because I've started trying to get more into reading now, and I've been using Kindle a lot, which I think is brilliant for reading Chinese, which maybe we can talk about a bit if you want. But there's a word that's 逐渐, which is like to mean like gradually to change. And I'm just going to type it. I'm going to type on this. Should be able to. Yeah, it's that one. And I've seen it a lot in like books and stuff I was reading, and I looked it up. Maybe like because it's a bit it's quite common in like novels because they try to describe like stuff slowly changing, and then I looked it up, and then like I think I saw it every day for about a month and was still forgetting. I'm like, Fuck this. I'm gonna create an Anki card, and then but now it's stuck just because I've seen it like probably 200 times now. But like for the longest time, I was like, this isn't even like complicated. I already knew that Jin meant like slow. It's just adding another character on the front. Why is this so hard? My brain just couldn't latch on for whatever reason.
Hmm. Yeah,
So that
happens.
happens quite a
It's
lot.
funny.
I guess it happens similar to you as well. That for some weird reason, only known to my brain, that it just decides it's not important enough to remember, even though I've
Yeah.
seen it like a million times.
Yeah, like I mean, even just today, I was reading like this simple book in Chinese, and there was some word, can't remember it, of course, but it showed up like 5 times within like one page, back and front, probably like 6 times then in that case. And every single time that it showed up, I had to go look up what it
Yeah,
was, how to say it, what does it mean? I just could not remember. I don't know why. It's crazy.
and I think I've got probably an even worse example. Have you heard of the Japanese anime Fairy Tale?
Yeah.
I was watching the Chinese dub on YouTube, and the Chinese name is Yao Jing, which is fairy, Wei Ba, which is tail. Yao Jing Wei Ba. And it's said like multiple times every episode. I think it was about episode 100 when he actually remembered how to say that word. It's like, and for the longest time I was like, wait, Yao Jing Shama. Oh, Wangler. It's just every time I just like forget. I'm just like, wait, this is like one of the most common words in this thing, and I'm almost into like triple digits in episodes. Why does my brain not know what it is? And
Hmm.
I know what it is now, but it's like I don't know why. But it's
Hmm.
interesting. So, what's your plans with where you're taking it now with foreign languages in general? Are you still focusing on Chinese, or are you going with something else?
Right now, I am focusing on Chinese. I'm kind of not doing anything else right now.
Mm.
Um, I actually am also trying to work on my Russian more because this is like a really long, potentially tangential other thing that I was going to make a video of myself about. But in a nutshell, I feel that my Russian is in a really strange spot. Like, I consider myself a native Russian speaker, but there's a lot of things that I still can't really say or talk about. And I feel like my Russian is, I feel like I can only really talk about things. I, I don't even know how to explain this because I
Like
haven't
daily
thought
things
about how.
related to like what you'd speak with your parents about, I guess.
Yeah, kind of that, but also almost only as if like when I'm speaking in Russian, I'm like a really young version of myself. As if I'm not 23, but I'm like maybe 12. Not that I can't talk about themes that are, mature or whatever, but
Just have to
like
paraphrase a lot, maybe.
I don't know. I just feel like almost a child because I had this experience where I went to a meetup of Russian speakers and people who were learning Russian in Seattle a couple months ago. And um, like when I was talking to people who are like actual native Russian speakers, so people who grew up in Russian, I can't really understand, like I can understand them in terms of I know exactly the words that they're saying, but a lot of things kind of go over my head and I don't feel like I can really connect with them
Mm.
as I can when I'm speaking like English, for example. So I just feel like there's some kind of disconnect where it's like not linguistically, but maybe culturally. I don't really know what it is yet, but
So,
my
do you
theory.
feel it's like a vocabulary thing, or do you feel it's just like they're like referencing loads of cultural things or TV shows and stuff that you may not have heard of because you just grew up in an American English environment?
I think it's more the latter, that they're referencing a lot of like jokes or just what's the other, like idioms? I think
Yeah.
that's what it is. Like idiomatic phrases or like, things that are supposed to be a joke, but I take them literally because I don't know that that's a joke and then I'm confused. And then they look at me like I'm a weirdo. because they're hearing a native sounding Russian speaker who doesn't get it, you know?
It's quite a unique situation.
Yeah. So it like made me feel extremely uncomfortable like speaking with them because when they were laughing, I was kind of like, oh, like, delayed,
Yeah.
not understanding why it's funny. And I was just thinking like, oh, they could be like inside jokes with themselves that I'm not supposed to laugh at, but I'm laughing and then I don't know. So
Well, I've been in that situation before, not even with just with Chinese when like I've been at a group of table and like everyone's laughing. I should probably laugh too. I have no idea what they're saying. Like,
yeah.
I totally understand what you're saying.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that's what I'm kind of prioritizing right now is like to practice my Russian more, even though like it's weird to practice your native language, you
But
know?
it makes sense. I feel like even though I grew up in an English environment, I feel like especially my like technical writing is really shitty for like yeah, it's because it's just not something you're used to. So it's also about the skills you need to develop as well. So I feel like I have to improve my English writing, especially for work,
Hmm.
because you have to write in a very concise and specific way, and I feel like I just don't, or like I skip out very important details because I've been staring at a spreadsheet for a week and it's obvious to me but not to the reader. Just miss out really
Hmm.
important things. So,
Hmm. Yeah. I know, I
so,
totally get that.
so what does an average day look like then? So you're doing Russian and Chinese. So how you?
Yeah. So
In
it's
the context you've been
extremely
speaking for a long
unstructured.
time, so I don't want to like keep you for too long as well because you probably have to like get ready for bed and other stuff, right?
Oh,
So
yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, this could be like our last topic.
yeah, okay, okay.
So my like day and everything language related is extremely unstructured. I don't like do it really every day. For Russian, for example, the thing that I do now is that I make a point to like call my mom and my grandma more. Just, I mean, I already call them a lot, but call them more and talk to them more. And I've gotten into a habit of instead of like saying a sentence in the more complicated way and like maybe getting it wrong, I will like rephrase it to be a simpler version of it and then say that. So I'm trying to undo that and just like, because they don't care if I say something wrong, they'll just correct me and then I'll like, improve. So I'm trying to just say it the way I want to,
Mm.
maybe like butcher some parts of it and. So that's what I'm trying to do because I realized that like certain things I'm like starting to lose the feeling for it. Does that sound right? Or
Mm.
does it not? And that's terrifying for me. So that's what I'm doing. Also, I am trying to text my dad more um, because he's like phenomenal with his Russian. He was like he loves reading and he's like really good at like all of the intricacies of the language. Like typically Russian people, they
So
like
your dad like native speaker as well?
yeah.
So he's like really good for a native speaker level, like really into books and literature and all that, literature and
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Yeah. So both of my parents, they're both like they are Russian
Mm.
100%. But my mom since so my dad is still in Russia, but my mom is in the United States.
Mm.
So my mom has been here for like I don't know, 20 years now. So even her Russian is kind of like not as good as it used to be because she doesn't use it as like such an academic level all the time anymore. She just really talks to her two children and to her mom about like, basic
Mm.
things. So even her language has like dropped a little bit. Um,
Mm.
so that's why I'm like also trying to talk to my obviously this is a very specific situation for me. I don't think other people can necessarily emulate it the same, but um so that's why I'm trying to specifically text to my dad because writing Russian is also very different than speaking it. It's like a lot more precise in the spelling and like the punctuation all over the place. It's like there's so many rules.
And like once you've
So
sent a text, it's there and you can see all the mistakes and it's out for anyone to see. It's not like when you speak, it's like gone. Like you can just see him
yeah,
like, oh wait, no, that's wrong, and that's wrong. Fuck.
yeah, yeah. So, and then I've also tried to start tweeting a little bit more in Russian, like I did the other day, and someone responded to me, and I was like, so. And then as for Chinese, for now, I'm just reading more so that to just like get it back into my day to day, also have the Chinese context constantly kind of active in my head too. Because my favorite way to learn Chinese is to read it. I don't have time right now to do more things because my work is taking up a lot of time. But yeah, so that's where I'm at right now.
So what are you reading?
I'm reading, I purchased for myself some graded readers because I found that saves me so much time and like annoyance since they have so I have two kinds. No, so one kind is that it's just the characters by itself, and every time there's a new character that they think you might not know at your level, they'll have it at the bottom with like a number, and they'll have the pinyin and the English for it. And it'll like be repeated a specific number of times in like the rest of the book for you to kind of naturally try to learn it. And they'll do that with grammatical structures and everything. And then there's another kind where there's the main line is Chinese characters, and right above it, it's the pinyin for them. And I think they also have like the vocab at the bottom. I forget. And it gives you this like cardboard little thing with windows, so you can only look at the characters if you want and not be distracted by the pinyin. Because I find if there's characters in pinyin, I will only be reading the pinyin.
Okay.
So,
This is a side question. Do you find if you just read pinyin without the characters, do you understand what it means?
Yeah, usually.
Okay. If I just did the pinyin, I have a really hard time understanding it. Because I've actually spent like a very, I don't want to go too much of a tangent, but because before I started Mandarin, I studied Cantonese for 2 years. So when I started Mandarin, characters was one of my stronger points because I'd already learned Cantonese for 2 years and learned a lot of characters through that. So I did a lot of listening to the audio while reading the characters. And then when I started texting people, I'm like, wait, I don't actually know what the pinyin is very well. So like, and even now, I've spent a lot of time reading Chinese characters, but a very small amount of time reading pinyin. So like, if I have to like read the pinyin, you almost have to like, unless it's something really like common, then you can obviously get what it is. But you almost have to like sub-vocalize and try to like figure out what it is. But if it's the character, it's like, and it's something I'm used to reading, I just kind of know instantly.
Yeah.
So
I think it's a little different depending on how you're reading the pinyin. Like if it's just a single word pinyin, I don't know which one it is unless I only know one character or like one word that could mean. But if there's a bunch, then obviously I have no idea. But if it's a whole sentence, theoretically, if you're reading the pinyin, it's like someone's saying that aloud to you. So I feel like you should be able to understand that with like all the context of that sentence.
I feel like I feel like it just takes more like mental processing because it's like instead of like knowing what it is from being used to reading it, I have to like figure it out, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I was the same as well because people suggested, oh, you want to put on like dual language subs when you're watching Netflix, like English and Chinese. I'm just like, okay, if I've got both, I'm not going to read the Chinese. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
So I just try to stay away from English subtitles because otherwise I'll just be lazy and just not pay attention to Chinese whatsoever.
Yeah, it's funny how like you think that you could force yourself to look at the one that is harder for you or like that you're just mentally a little bit slower at comparatively. But no, for some reason your brain is just like, you see something that you immediately know, you're just going to keep reading that and you're not going to pay attention to the other thing. Unless you, it's just like so much mental effort to, if you have those two versions, to focus on the one that's harder.
Yeah.
It's rough.
And I find reading subtitles can be quite tiring. Yesterday, two of my course mates came round. One of them was speak. But one was a name, one was another friend. One was an ABC, but only Chinese since he was quite little, and his Chinese is like really good. And the other one was Japanese. So we were watching this Japanese film. The Chinese name was Nida Mingse. I guess the English name is Your
Oh, Your
Name,
Name? Yeah.
and it was really good. But we were watching it on Netflix here in Taiwan, and now we're like, okay, well, there's only one option for subtitles, which is Chinese. So I was having to try and like read the Chinese, and because the audio was Japanese, I literally just had the subtitles to go off, and like I understood like I think most of it, but I was so tired at the end. I was like, okay, I need to have a nap or something because it's just so tiring just trying to. I can't because my reading speed is like quite slow in Chinese, so I have to like force myself to read faster, and it seems really unnatural for me. But yeah, I found that really tiring.
Yeah. I actually have one last question for you about like Chinese and reading. Um, so I find personally that when I'm reading a sentence, I don't like say it in the right segments as would be naturally said.
Oh,
So,
you mean like the way the characters are split up as you're saying it?
so not like I'm not splitting up like a character that's like meant to be together with like two pieces, but like uh, uh I don't know, like if I was trying to say 今天晚上我去了那个地方, I don't know, something like that. But I would say maybe like 今天晚上, which is like, okay, that's completely not what I was trying to say. But there's like,
The pacing
let me
sounds
do an
different, I guess.
English
Just like
example. Let me
okay.
do an English example. When we're speaking together, okay, that's how I would say it in English, as opposed to when we're speaking together.
Mm.
So I would put
So it doesn't
pauses
flow as
when I'm
well.
like mentally getting tired, I guess, of like reading something. Or like I don't know when to insert the pauses in a sentence where it would be like natural. And I was wondering,
Yeah.
first, does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. It's like when you're reading, you're kind of like sub-vocalizing, and if you were speaking in English, you'd naturally have these set phrases. So you'd say something quite fast, and then you'd pause, and then you'd say another
Mm-hmm.
chunk, and these chunks like go into you intuitively, and because you've heard other people and said these chunks probably millions of times or thousands of times before. But
Yeah.
coming from Chinese, when we don't have the same exposure, it's kind of like you don't know how to pass it as well. So it might be like 今晚上我跟我的朋友去什么地方
Mm-hmm,
and you just put it like yeah um I think it I think that's yeah I have the same problem. It doesn't flow as naturally, but like when I'm reading I try to just focus mostly on do I understand what the plot is and just try to focus on that.
mm-hmm.
Although sometimes, because I don't know how relevant this is, but sometimes because my brain like passed the characters wrong before, it like changed the meaning of the word. And I think this is probably just because I was watching too many Chinese dubbed anime and they keep on saying the word jiahua like every single line, like jiga jiahua.
Uh-huh.
And I was reading something and it was like jia jia huo guo dian. But I said jia jia huo. Oh wait, jia jia huo guo dian. Okay. The first time I just read it, it's like jia jia huo. And my teacher was like, 不是. I was like, eh? Oh, 指甲火锅店. Okay, okay, I know. Okay, and my brain like passed it wrong the first time. I had to look a double take.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's just normal, right? It's just yeah, because my
Yeah.
Chinese is reading still not like brilliant. Like I have to be very, very carefully select what material I read, and even then, even if it's like an easy book, there's probably going to be quite a lot of new words I don't know still. So I'm just
Mm-hmm.
like using Kindle to try and help me look them up. But it's
Mm-hmm.
getting slowly better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like the main reason why I bring that up is because I feel like when you read, you're kind of being given like example sentences and ways to, I don't know, have references in your head of how to structure future sentences, right? And then when you're, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but when I'm reading it, I internally have like a voice that is reading it aloud and trying to give it like um a not a beat, but like that,
Rhythm.
yeah,
Rhythm.
like the rhythm,
Mm.
put the pauses in the right place, chunk it in the right way, like read it I don't know, smoothly. Because then when I speak later, I will have that like training to, I don't know, base my speaking off of,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. Like I imagine, especially if you're gonna like I don't know how do I phrase this? It's like there's got to be a connection between knowing how to like read and chunk things right, and when you're speaking also chunk things right, because it's the same like kind of processing of like
Yeah.
when I speak, I'm going to stop somewhere, take a breath, and I have to pick where that is going to be.
I mean, I don't know if this is entirely answers your question, but I find by reading a lot, I got in the habit of reading about an hour every day at the moment, and I find because my vocabulary is increased,
Hmm.
when I watch stuff, I can understand more. Even with the subtitles on or off, I can understand more. So like,
Hmm.
I feel like if I read more, increase my vocabulary, and then go and get a lot of audio exposure as well, then I'm naturally it's easier for me to understand audio content. Then I can probably more easily pick up the rhythm from audio content.
Mm.
But there's like a gap
Okay.
for me between written and audio input. So like if I'm getting like, I find like formal written Chinese really hard still.
Hmm.
And like now, if it's a very formal bit of Chinese, I can okay, depending on the subject matter. If I can like on grammar and stuff, I can understand it okay if it's got words I know. Then if I listen to someone speak formal Chinese, a lot of it goes over my head because I'm used to reading it and I'm really not used to
Hmm.
hearing it. I
Yeah.
went to watch this historical drama or something, and it was just loads of little things. Like instead of using de, they were using zhi because that's like the more formal version or something. And they just kept like loads of little changes like that. But then we have like 4 or 5 of those changes every sentence. I'm just like this just hurts my brain. Like I'm just not used to it at all
Hmm.
at the moment. Yeah.
Hmm.
Cool.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess like the solution is just listen more, more exposure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's never an easy answer. Just
Yeah.
more hours and hopefully it gets better over time.
Yeah, because like when I was, um, because you mentioned that you watched my video where I did the storytelling contest in Chinese.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So that was a script. I had written that, and I had gotten it like corrected by my professor, and then I was just to memorize that and be able to tell it as animatedly and naturally as possible. And even though it was like memorized and I had no trouble saying it or anything, I remember my boyfriend commented that it sounded like a little weird. Not, and he couldn't even pick out like what was weird about it, but it was just that it didn't sound authentic in the pauses. That like he was like, "Oh, I wouldn't have paused there. I would have like said this, then paused." And then that like I think that just stuck in my head that, "Oh, interesting." So that was another little nuance that made language more or less understandable and like,
Hmm.
you know.
I wonder if it sounded less natural because it was like scripted. Because there's a YouTuber called Dogen that makes like comedic videos in Japanese, and apparently he gets loads of comments like every video like your Japanese is like almost perfect, but I can't quite put my finger on where it is. But like your videos just sound a bit unnatural and weird. It's like, but your Japanese all sounds like there's no mistakes, but I just don't know why it just sounds a bit off to me. And
Mm.
he thought about that a long time and was saying it's because he scripts it, records each line multiple times and picks which one he thinks the best and then puts it together so it also maybe sounds a bit there's no mistakes in terms of Japanese pronunciation or grammar or vocabulary or whatever. It just sounds a bit less
Hmm.
natural compared to if you just had a Japanese person just speaking. Because I
Hmm.
don't have to think about getting stuff right. And if you focus so much on getting it right, maybe it makes the output a bit less natural. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm nowhere near that level of. I'm nowhere near his level of Japanese, and my Chinese is nowhere near that level. So I'm just trying to focus on building my vocabulary first, because that seems to me like a bigger problem. Because that's what's stopping me from like being able to understand and engage with people is if I can't understand them. So I'm trying to focus like 90%
Hmm.
of my effort on just improve my comprehension. Because for
That's
me, that's my
true.
biggest barrier at the moment.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe
No, I
worry about
agree.
the stuff later.
Yeah, details, details. It's just like, because when I was reading earlier today, I just felt like in my head I was reading the whole thing as a run-on sentence, and I didn't know where to stop because it was one of those where it's just a bunch of duh uh,
uh,
describing one object. It's like the thing that he saw that I pulled out of my pocket, blah 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 verb, right?
yeah.
It's like where do you pause? So yeah, that was just on my mind recently. So
I
yeah.
probably have the same problem as you, just no one's told me yet.
I'm so sorry for bringing that up.
Just like
uh,
yet another thing I need to worry about now.
yeah,
But,
no.
yeah.
Don't worry about it. I really don't think it's like very important. I think it's just like something I had noticed that honestly was just a detail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But my friend, well, a YouTuber, I originally started off watching a lot of his videos and kind of I spoke to him a few times now. There's a YouTuber called Matt versus Japan. And we're like
Mhm.
we're all right friends now. We Skype every few months, and he was telling me I think he thinks shadowing's helped quite a lot because he says like
Mhm.
because it helps pick up like, the rhythm and stuff. And he had like a video on how he did some clever stuff with a microphone, so he can hear his voice through his headphones in real time at the same time as he can hear the video from YouTube. And he just practiced
Oh.
shadowing like that, and he feels like it's helped quite a lot. But he
Mhm.
said he feels like it has to be something that you can. It has to be like native stuff, obviously, that you can understand easily without it. And he kind of was trying to really hammer the point home that it feels like if your listening comprehension isn't really good, shadowing might be more harmful than good because you can't hear the sounds clearly. So you might be thinking you're getting it more right, but actually be getting it more wrong. So
Mm.
he said for the first however many years, maybe like 5 years or something, he was literally just listening as much as he can and reading as much as he can. Which to me, I was like, okay, that makes sense. And for me, if it simplifies it, it's less stuff to worry about. I'm just like, okay, well, I'm just gonna forget about or do as best as I can with my brain up and just watch this TV drama,
Mhm.
which is obviously easier said than done because I'm just thinking in the background like, wait, what tone was that? Oh wait, no, like, turn your brain off. I'm just like, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds about right. That makes sense. I'm getting ahead of
Cool.
myself and worrying about things that are not important.
I think I do the same as well. Just like looking at like, oh, maybe I should want to read like Journey to the West, but I'm just like, I can't even read a contemporary novel. Let's just bank that for like 5 years or something. I can come back to it later.
Hmm.
Yeah, cool. Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap this up? I'm
Um,
going for a while. I just completely lost track of time.
wow, 2 hours. It's okay. It was fun. It was a good conversation. It was literally like exactly the thing that you said, where we've never like spoken before, but we were able to have this 2 hour long conversation like completely naturally, which is like
That's why I love the language
amazing.
learning community.
Yeah, it's so fun. But yeah, I guess that's my last note, that thank you for this conversation. It's been really enjoyable and fun, and like I think I've uh, even learned a lot actually myself. So
Already? Okay. Hopefully, I haven't said anything too misleading or
no.
wrong. But yeah, thanks very much for the conversation. And anyone wants to check out Valerie, I'll leave a link to her YouTube and Twitter in the description. And I'll also leave a link to that video she did on linguistics and accent because I thought that was quite interesting. So thanks so much, Valeria. Thanks so much,
Yeah.
Valeria, for coming on. I really enjoyed it as well.
Yeah. All right. Cool. See ya.